Alright, so I bought the XTP intake manifold spacer, which is a beautiful thing, by the way. Thank you, Gray. This is the parts you get. You get the spacer, a gasket, and the bolts and washers that you'll need. So he gives some good, I think it's a PDF file, good instructions on how to install this thing, but I figured for people like me, a video would make things a whole lot easier. So I'm going to make a video for you and try and film at the exact same time. There we go. Okay, so your first step would be to disconnect your battery. You don't have to. That's just the first step that Gray lists in his instructions. I left mine on so I can listen to my radio. So your next step then would be to take this intake off and this little cover. And so what I've done is loosened up just these hose clamps on each side, so this should come out. And then I have this throttle body spacer, so I've got some kind of funky stuff going on in here, but this plastic piece would normally on your engine just bolt right up to this right there. So these are 10mm bolts that go through here, and so I've already loosened mine up so I can just pull this right off. So you take those two out. They're also a Phillips head, but I didn't feel like stripping anything out, so just use the 10mm, and then should just be able to pull everything out. This might prove to be difficult with one hand. So then the last thing you'll do to get this cover off is this little hose. It's got a little clamp thing right there. So I'm going to take my pliers, squeeze that, slide it back on the hose, and that should just pull right off of there. Just like that. And then this thing is free to come off. Alright, so with that stuff out of the way, your next step is going to be to take off the solenoid setup. So you take this can off with this 12mm bolt, and then unplug this wiring harness. This is pretty easy. You just got a pair of needle nose pliers here. Do this with one hand again. And you just squeeze the middle like that, and it slides right out of there. And then after that, on the back side of that thing, you can see here is another 10mm bolt. Remove that, and then you can get the whole solenoid setup taken out of your way. Okay, so I got that stuff undone. Just took the solenoid and the wiring and stuff and just pulled it up out of the way. A note to you: when you do undo those bolts, that 12mm and the 10mm bolt, they are on there really tight. And it makes a really bad popping sound, like you just broke something. Scared the crap out of me. You didn't break anything, they're just on there really tight, so you'd be fine there. So after you get those pulled out of the back, or out of the way, head to the back of the motor here, and you got to get this big wire loom out of the way. It's held onto this little metal bracket by two of these little plastic clips. They're pretty easy to get off. All you got to do is get some pliers, squeeze the thing together, push on it a little bit, and you just push it right out. There's two of them. There's one here and one right there. I already got the other one off. And head to the back, and there are two more 10mm bolts. I already took one out. There's one right there, and then just on the back side of this, there's another 10mm bolt right down there. Take those two out, and you can take that whole bracket off of there. Once that bracket's off, reach underneath this wire loom, and you can see back under here, there's that gray wiring harness. Unplug that, and that's your next step. Alright, so my bracket is still back there. I didn't take it out completely, but it's unhooked from that, so that when this folds open, you're not fighting with anything back there. Alright, your next step is over here between your battery and your fuse box. Right here, there's a 12mm bolt right there, and there's another one. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see it or not. Let's see. Hey, you can see the other one. Well, maybe you can't see the other one. Anyway, there's another one right back here. It's directly below that. Right there, and then right there. So you take those two 12mm bolts out, which should free this up. Do not unhook these hoses. You don't need to. You're not actually going to take this out of the engine compartment. You're just going to fold it open while you lay the spacer on there. So don't unhook these hoses. It's kind of in the way of this one, but I mean, it's a rubber hose, so just push on it and it'll get out of your way. Okay, so with that stuff out of the way, unbolted, and so on, now we're getting somewhere. We get to take off the nut on a stud. There's one there, and there's another one right here. Now they're a 10mm nut, so just your regular socket will work to get those off. I've already loosened these ones up, so you can just pull them off of there. You still have that stud sticking out though, and out the top it's a Torx style. So in the instructions, Gray is giving you a picture of what one looks like. It's an E6. I'll be honest, I don't have one, so I'm not really going to show you how I get those out of there. I don't want anybody else being as ignorant as me. Anyway, so after you get those out, he says don't actually take these all the way out. Just loosen them up, because you'll use those to guide on your spacer. Alright, so you get those, that one and this one, loosened up. And once those are loosened up, you go through and you pop off all your bolts. Pull them all the way out. Then this whole thing will come off. We'll get to that here in just a second. Okay, so a couple more things you got to pop off here before you can actually pull the plenum off of there. There's this hose right here off the back of where the throttle body comes into. So after you do the little clamp thing again, you gotta pop that one off. If it comes off of there. So got that one off. And then this over the top of your throttle body spacer. Pull it off of there. Goes on there, pop that one off. And then again, up here on the back of the motor, underneath where that bracket was, that bracket we took off, there's another one under here. You can just see that right there. So that also has to come off. Alright, and so those, you should be ready to go now, I think. Okay, so there it is, lifted off there. In his picture, he shows it flipped up and out of the way. I'm not doing that, just because I got plenty of room right there to fit everything in there. But I don't know if you can see on the video or not. It's got some dirt and dust and stuff in there. It's clean around the ports, which is what you really want to be careful of. When you're pulling this off, be really careful and slow. Make sure you don't have anything sitting around there that's going to fall down in your ports, or you could really screw some stuff up. But I have a bucket of carb cleaner right here. I'm just going to get a little bit on a towel and clean that up before I put my gasket down. And then once this is all cleaned up and polished up a little bit, we'll go ahead and throw the gasket on first. And see the studs are still in here. So we'll leave the studs in there, put your gasket over those so you know they fit perfect. And the same with the spacer. Then you drop the spacer on there, make sure it is sitting on there the way it should be. So we'll go to that next. Okay, so there really is only one way these can go on there. You're not going to screw anything up. So we'll just go ahead and toss this in here. Get that to slide over the stud. And there she be. Alright, got the gasket set in there. And we'll stick this in there now. If everything goes right, it should just sit down over the top of those studs and just settle in there. But it's a dang tight fit. Oh, and I got a wiring harness in the way, that's why. Alright, well, I'll mess with that.